Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Snipe and Score podcast. Today, we're going over everything trade deadline in the NHL over the past couple weeks. I'm Aiden Show Tim Calkins. I'm here with my co-host Sean Wallace. Sean, let's tell people what we're talking about today.
All right, let's do it. We've got a trade deadline special today. Thank you so much, guys, for your views on the last podcast. We appreciate it, and we'll keep working hard for you guys. We got a lot of trades to talk about. It was pretty active last week. Last Friday, we had. Man, it was busy. We had the Bruins selling. We had Kyle Dubas making some moves. It was exciting. I'll tell you that. First and foremost, let's talk about Seth Jones and the Panthers. The Blackhawks traded away their star defenseman Seth Jones to the Panthers for Spencer Knight, goalie, and a 2027 first-round pick. Aiden, what do you think about that move?
I think it's a win-win for both teams. Seth Jones is already proven as a Panther that he has been great, and especially since Aaron Ekblad got suspended for 20 games for using the good old needle, steroids. But I think he's been great. I think he might return to that. I don't think he'll be as good as he was in Columbus, but I think he'll return to a level something like that. And Spencer Knight finally getting a chance to be the number one. He was behind Bobrovsky for all those years and also went in the Players Assistance Program years ago. Finally gets a chance to be number one on a young team that desperately needs some young talent, some good young talent. And I think he made like a 41 save win, a 5-1 win in his first game in Chicago. So I think it's a great signing or a great trade for both teams, and it helps Florida for their cup push, and it helps Chicago, finally get a solid guy in net, because we all know Peter Mrazek was not the answer in net long term for the Blackhawks. So I like the trade for them. Obviously, a first round pick. It's going to be a late first in 2027, probably. We don't know. That's 2 years from now. But a first round pick's a first round pick, and with Chicago, it's very necessary now.
Yeah, it's almost like, did the Panthers know something that we didn't with Ekblad? Almost seems like too coincidental. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, he got suspended like a couple days after the fact. So I mean, they might have had something come in possibly. You never know.
Interesting. But you know what? Regardless, Seth Jones, that's a great addition. Even with Ekblad suspended, I think when those two get back on the ice together for the playoffs, that's going to be very hard to get past. Florida is pretty much set. It really propels them forward.
And there's another guy that they got also. It's going to make it a little harder for teams to get past Florida, but we'll talk about him when we get there.
Yeah, definitely one we have to get to. And then other side for the Blackhawks, I think Kyle Davidson made this trade in his car because his 2-year-old was screaming at him, I guess, in the house. So he decided to go on a little road trip and start taking some calls. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Just very quickly, because we got a lot to get to today, so we're not going to do studs and duds today, unfortunately for you guys. That'll be next week's episode when we kind of discuss more stuff. We might get to the random player of the day. We'll see. But do you think that Davidson, his job might be on the line if in the offseason he doesn't do too much and the Blackhawks start slow again? Because Commodores time's ticking, and I feel like a lot of Chicago fans saw what happened in Buffalo like all those years ago, where he eventually got the coach fired and the GM fired at the same time because he said he wasn't going to stay, and then nothing happened for 3 or 4 years, and you requested a trade out and then won a cup 2 years later in Vegas.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think Davidson is on a little bit of the hot seat right now, and I only say that because Chicago obviously rebuilding right now, but I think during this rebuild you want to see some sort of progression, right? We haven't really seen that at all in a long time. So I think Davidson is on the hot seat. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept him, but he's going to be one that'll be kind of thrown up in the air this offseason if Chicago doesn't do really anything to look like they're progressing. So, yeah, interesting that you bring that up. Let's get to our next trade. We got the Oilers acquiring Trent Frederick for Max Warner and second and a fourth-round pick. What do you think about that one?
Can't forget Max Jones as well. He's also played a key piece in that bottom six so far. With a couple
yeah,
guys
you're right. Oilers also get Max Jones in that trade, too. They also get a prospect, Peter Hauser.
But I like the deal for Edmonton. They traded out Ryan McLeod in the offseason to Buffalo. He has blossomed into one of Buffalo's best centermen. And they needed another guy like him that could play the bottom six, play the third-line center role, and I think that Trent Frederick, big body, throws the body, perfect for playoff hockey, especially in a Western Conference that is known to be a little bit more tougher than the East. I think he's a perfect fit for Edmonton. And the Bruins get a pretty good return for a UFA going out, a second-round pick this year. I think could be very valuable, gauging them electing to finally rebuild instead of trying to go Tweenersville and see what works.
Yep, Oilers trying to make that playoff push again. They made it to the Cup last year and lost in Game 7 after fighting back. I think Frederick He'll be a good piece to that forward group right there. I think he's going to propel him to the Cup again.
I don't know about that.
I think it'll be close. I think you'll see McDavid angry on the ice. I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be close.
There's one team in the West I don't think they're not going to get by. I think, in my opinion.
Who'd that be?
Colorado. We'll talk about why when we get there.
Look, I think it's all fun and games until you see how these teams do in the playoffs. So I think the Oilers, they did it last year. They know what it takes. We'll see what happens, but I don't disagree with that. We'll see. I'm glad there are buyers at the deadline. I think that's a good addition, and I think, I think they have the talent to go back there again. We'll see what happens. All right, this is another big one. How about the Lightning acquiring Oliver Bjorkstrand, and they get Yanni Gord back, also a 5th-round pick, in exchange for not 1, but 2 first-round picks and a 2025 second-round pick. What do you think of that one?
And Mikey Easymont. Can't forget about Mikey Easymont.
What do you think about the haul that they gave up to get those 2 forwards?
I think it's an overpay, but if you're Tampa, it's a necessary overpay. It's very similar to what they did with Nick Paul years ago when they went on their cup runs. Barclay Goodrow. Tanner Jeannot, but that one didn't work out for me. He wasn't as productive as they would have hoped. It's a typical Tampa move, and they obviously know Yanni Gord. He's won 2 cups with them. He's going to fit perfectly in their 3rd, 4th line. He can rotate out of the wing to center. He's going to be good for him. He knows how to win hockey games in the postseason. He's always showed up in the playoffs. It's a good move. Now Bjorkstrand, I think he's had a down year with Seattle, but he'll be a good 3rd line guy. Gives them some depth scoring. I think he'll flourish a little bit. From Seattle, though, they made out like bandits, in my opinion. 2 first-round picks. They're probably going to be lower first-round picks, but you never know. Something could happen with Tampa where they struggle and they become lottery picks. But I think there's conditions on those picks, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, there is, because if they're top 10 protected, so if they move into the top 10, Seattle gets 3rd-round picks that year.
Oh, actually, I didn't even know that. I know they're conditional.
I'm pretty sure that those are conditions. Correct me if I'm wrong. We could always double check it if you want to look that up quick, Sean, as I'm kind of finishing my soliloquy over here. But 2nd-round pick, that's a good return. And then Mikey Easymont, he's just kind of depth fodder, just to replace one of the 2 guys on the roster just to get a guy back. So it's an all-in push for Tampa. And this Atlantic division is just loaded between Toronto, Tampa, and we'll talk about Toronto at the very end of the episode probably, because we're going to go in order all the trades happen. But in Florida are just absolutely loaded, and it's going to be the fight for the one in the Atlantic, the division, is going to be so crucial, because you don't want to play either Tampa or Florida or Toronto. I mean, maybe I'd want to play Toronto because they have a history of choking in the playoffs. Haha, Leafs fans. Sorry, not sorry. But hey, just be thinking, y'all not play Boston this year.
Yeah, that's true. You were right. First-round picks are conditional, top 10 protected, like you said. I'll give you my thoughts on this. This is a huge overpay. Seattle won this trade.
I agree.
So, I think if Bjorkstrand and Gord can't do anything in the playoffs, you got to look at the Lightning front office and think, oh, man, swing and a miss. Well, huge miss, actually.
Well, but they know their window's closing, and I give Breezeball props for saying we don't need draft picks now. We need to compete for a cup now while we still have our guys that are still playing at an elite level. So it's an overpay for sure, but like most of the trades at this deadline, but it's necessary for what Tampa's trying to do.
Yeah, I do think there are quite a few overpays at this deadline, but to that point, I would have thought the opposite. If your window is closing and you think it might come sooner rather than later, why not keep all those picks to look to the future? That's my thought process behind it. Why trade all those picks if you think your window is going to close? I would use that to look to your future.
Well, I think they feel like they've got like a 3-4 year window left, so they're trying to make a swing. They utilize the max of those 3-4 years. So,
don't you think they could have gotten better players besides Bjorkstrand and Gord? I mean,
do they need them though? That's the question. Like they got Kucherov, Gensel, Cirelli, Hagel, Point,
right,
Paul. They really didn't need much in the top 6, and defensively, like maybe they could use like a Luke Shen, but like they're pretty solid on D regardless, and like they only really need a bottom 6 guys. It's always is with Tampa. Like their top 6 has always been formidable. It's just the bottom 6 needs a little bit of work, and this is their work to fix the bottom 6.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the Lightning getting Bjorkstrand and Gord, but I'm just not a fan of what they had to give up to get those 2. Gord going back to Tampa is going to help a lot. He was there before he got picked in the expansion draft. So, I mean, they essentially traded Gord for a first and then Bjorkstrand for a first and a second.
Well,
and they also got rid of Yzerman.
I think it's 100% a great trade for Seattle off the bat.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
If Tampa Bay matches up with, say, Toronto in the first round and they lose in 7 like they had the last time they played, I think, then we can consider this trade a failure because they'll probably re-sign Gordon if they have the cap space. If they lose Gordon in the offseason, you essentially got a rental and a guy on a 1-year contract for 2 first-round picks in a second.
It's just, would you look at Yanni Gordon and think, oh, yeah, definitely worth a first-round pick?
Yeah, well, for his playoff experience, for what he does in the playoffs, yeah, I would. He's a gamer in the playoffs.
Even on an expiring contract?
Yes, he's a gamer in the playoffs. He is a gamer. I would love to have Yanni Gordon on the Sabres in the playoffs if we ever got there because he turns his game up to another level in the playoffs.
Well, you know what? I will say this: time will tell, and if they don't win a cup, I think it was a huge overpay.
And that's the caveat. If you don't go out and win a cup, then this trade looks very dumb, just like the Tanner Jeannot one did.
No, I agree with all that. All right, next trade. We got the Predators and the Penguins. Predators acquire Michael Bunting for Tommy Novak and Luke Schenn. Luke Schenn was eventually sent to Winnipeg for a second and a fourth.
Stupid trade.
Stupid trade?
Stupid trade.
So, for the Predators, yes. For the Penguins, I was all over Dubas on our last podcast because I felt as if, Dubas can't really do anything in terms of offseason moves, trade deadline. I think he's, I think he proves his worth through the draft. He's great at finding talent through the draft. I've never been a huge fan of moves he's made at the deadline or in the offseason in terms of getting all these contracts.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think the Penguins finally made a decision. They said, we're finally going to sell. We're looking towards the future. We know we can't compete anymore. Let's just acquire as much draft capital as they can. And that made me very angry because I was very happy as a Caps fan.
With their mediocrity?
Yeah, and I was hoping it was going to continue. But now I think Dubas is finally saying, all right, let's just call it a day and finally look towards the future. And that's exactly what they did. So now they have an insane amount of draft capital now over the next 2-3 years after that deadline. All the moves that he made I thought were actually excellent. Turning Luke Schenn into a second and a fourth, and they get Tommy Novak for Michael Bunting. Yeah, I think the Penguins won this trade.
Oh,
I think the Penguins are actually winners at the deadline, actually, because they finally picked a route to go instead of just sticking with mediocrity for the rest of time. So.
I can't call them winners because they had a couple other guys they probably should have offloaded and they didn't. So
like Rickard Rakell.
That's the big one specifically. No, and I'm not upset as a Sabres fan. We had our big trade and we'll get to that and my opinions on it. But if you're really gonna just like Boston too, I'll give Boston more the benefit of the doubt because they sold off most of their big players. But if you're going to commit to this rebuild, then I would assume that Rickard Rakell would have been gone. I would assume that you would have been shopping Chris Letang and Carlson. I know that you don't want to get rid of Letang, but he's old and the contract is not very great. And I know you want to keep Sidney happy, and I know you don't want to rebuild because of Sidney. But, dude, it's time. It's done. I know that Sidney and Gino are still great players. Sidney's still a top 10 player in the NHL, and if you don't like to hear that, then I'm sorry. Go watch a different sport.
Yeah, the thing is, I think it was time like 2 or 3 years ago.
It was.
Which is why I was so mad when they finally decided to just pull the plug and say, "All right, we're done. Experiment's over. Let's just rebuild."
It was 100% time 2-3.
Get all the draft capital.
It was 100% time 2 or 3 years ago, but I forgot who the GM was at the time. I think it was Hextall, was it?
Hextall, yep.
And then Dubas, they want to keep Sidney happy, so he doesn't go to Colorado and play with McKinnon. So, but you laugh, but it's true.
Absolutely not. There's no way they're trading Crosby to the Avalanche.
Well, if Sidney requested a trade, I think that's the only spot he's going to want to go.
Sidney Crosby will never request a trade ever.
Even
if they are going to rebuild, I think Sidney Crosby still has a good
big
few
if.
years.
Big if he ever did, he's going to go to Colorado. But yeah, I think I love the deal from. It's a good deal from Pittsburgh perspective. I've always loved Tommy Novak. He's having a down year, but I think he'll be better in Pittsburgh. Luke Schenn, as soon as I saw Luke Schenn was in the deal, I'm like, yeah, he's getting dealt somewhere else. And then Michael Bunting, I guess he's a good player for Nashville, but Nashville is having
I just
catastrophic season.
I don't understand the move for Nashville. Why get rid of? I understand getting rid of Luke Schenn, but Tommy Novak.
Unless you think that Bunting is gonna be like a good piece for next year, I don't understand why Nashville didn't just absolutely blow it up. They're Tweenerville and it's not good.
I wonder if they're just hesitant to say, all right, well, we were the biggest spenders in the offseason last year, and we're not going to blow it up after half a season. So let's just give this thing time, see if it eventually works out. I don't think it's going to work out.
My issue
but
is
I kind of understand the reasoning.
My issue is
really.
all those guys that you signed that you could have got rid of are all over 33 years old.
Yes.
That is my biggest issue with
yes.
that.
Yes.
Right now, where their value is probably the highest, especially in a seller's market, that is absolutely batshit absurd with how high guys were. For example, we'll talk about the trade later a little bit. Anthony Beauvillier got dealt for a second-round pick. That is absurd. That is nuts.
Yep.
With the seller's market that's super extremely high, I don't understand why you wouldn't have tried to offload a little bit more. That's just the confusing part to me. But we'll move on to the next trade.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Next trade. Speaking of what the heck are you doing?
Rangers edition.
What's going on, New York? We traded away Riley Smith. Okay, all right, I understand the move. Get Brendan
Brisson.
Brisson, the prospect, and a third round pick. Okay, and then the next trade,
they acquire
Carson
Soucy
for a third round pick.
Yeah,
What's going on, New York?
I don't know. I love the Riley Smith trade. He's a veteran going out for Brendan Brisson, who never really had an opportunity out in Vegas. So I think that that's a good move. I think Brisson is going to be a good player for the Rangers. But to acquire Carson Soucy, I don't like. I understand they're in a playoff push right now, but they're so confusing.
I mean, quote unquote playoff push. I wouldn't even call it a playoff push. Even if they do make the playoffs, what noise are they going to make?
None. They're going to be like Washington last year.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't understand I hope this doesn't come back to bite me and they actually end up beating Washington in the first round if they do make the playoffs.
Washington's not. I doubt it. I mean, I don't think so.
You never know what's going to happen in the playoffs. Everyone plays different in the playoffs.
I agree, but I
don't like.
The differences are not as deep as they were when they played Washington last year or years prior. Washington's deeper, better.
Yeah, they're holding their own right now. It's like night and day compared to last year.
Man, if you're Chris Drury, Sabres legend Chris Drury, what do you do in the offseason? Do you trade away Mika Zibanejad? Do you trade Kreider? Do you keep him? Do you try to add? Alexi Lafreniere signed that big extension at 3.5, I think, and he's been very, very, very underwhelming. He's been Dylan Cousins-esque underwhelming, which is not a good sign for the Rangers.
It's just...
what do you do?
What happened in 1 year, man?
Igor got paid, what was 11.5, and he's been terrible since.
I just don't understand what happened in 1 year. I don't get it. I think what they need to do, what I would do if I were Chris Drury, just make a coaching change.
I would have. Laviolette should have been gone earlier in the year.
I wouldn't say that, but I'll say at the end of the year he should be gone. They absolutely need to fire Laviolette, find a new head coach. Let's see what happens after the coaching change, and then I'll say blow it up. But to do that again, didn't they just rebuild not too long ago? I mean,
if you want to call it a rebuild, I guess, but it only lasted a year.
So, with that being
more
said...
of a retool.
Yeah, I just... Man, to do that is that must suck, I gotta say.
Tell me about it. We've been doing it for 14 years.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I'll tell you this. Yeah, the Rangers, if it doesn't succeed next year, yeah, blow it up. But let's make a coaching change first, then see what happens. All right, moving on from the Rangers, we got the Oilers acquiring Jake Wallman for a 2026 conditional first. If it's in the top 12, it'll be moved to 2027, and the Sharks also acquire Carl Berglund. Man, I can't say any names today. Oh my gosh. We got to make a reel of me just mispronouncing all these names.
Yeah, but I actually was he got a first-round pick, and then I saw the numbers with Jake Wallman, and I'm I understand it now.
Isn't he huge on TikTok? Doesn't he make a ton of TikToks?
He does. He's Mr. Gritty, as he's known. I love this deal for Edmonton. They needed a defenseman, especially a guy that can cover up for Eric Bouchard. Kidding. Eric Bouchard, excuse me, Evan Bouchard, wrong first name. Evan Bouchard, who's been drawing the ire of Oilers fans the entire year because of his lack of defense, or so they say. But I think Wallman's great. He's a good puck-moving defenseman. He was a plus on a San Jose's team that's miserable. And Sharks get returned to get a first-round pick back. More capital. Trade it if they're good in a year. And they're going to be because Celebrini and Smith and Eklund are all studs. They just need some defense help, I think, and an actual goaltender. I like it from both sides. More depth for the Oilers, and Wallman's a great defenseman, and the Sharks, it'll benefit them for the future. So more prospects is never a bad thing because you can always trade those prospects out for players. So I think it's a good deal from both sides.
Yeah, I love the move for both. I love the move for both sides. I actually think the Sharks probably could have gotten maybe a little bit more for Wallman. He's a great defenseman.
Maybe, but you take what you can get.
Yeah, set up for the first round. I like the move for both sides a lot. Oilers buying at the deadline. I still say, to my last point, you never know how teams are going to play in the playoffs, but the Oilers did it last year. I think they know what to do. And the guys they acquired at the deadline, I think will really, really, really help them. Wallman and the other guy we talked about.
The one thing I think the Oilers should have addressed at the deadline, and Stan Bowman didn't. Goaltending. Do you really trust that if Stuart Skinner goes into Stuart Skinner mode in the playoffs and he's not good, do you really trust that Calvin Pickard? No offense to Calvin Pickard, he's been great. He's been good this year as a backup. Do you really trust that Calvin Pickard's going to make you those big saves in a playoff game when you need to have a winner, to steal a game or two?
No, not at all.
I don't.
No, I agree with you. But who are they going to get though? That's the thing. Who did they have the cap to go out and get, and what were they going to trade? I guess there wasn't really anybody on the market at this deadline available for trade that could really help someone in the playoffs. Right?
I'm sure that if you talked Anaheim into retaining 50%, you'd got to another team retaining 25% on Gibson, and you offered enough.
But is John Gibson really that guy to help someone?
As a backup, he'd be excellent. He would have been excellent for the Oilers.
Okay, I don't doubt that. That's a good point. Yeah, and 50% is, I think that's fair too.
It'd be 75% because you'd have the other 25% retained from the other team.
Yeah.
So, but the Ducks took him off the block fairly early in the deadline day, and he didn't get moved. So.
Yep. And then on the other side, Sharks keep getting younger, keep getting stronger. I like the move for both sides. All right, moving on to our next blockbuster
before the deadline.
The Avalanche acquire Brock Nelson in exchange for Cal Ritchie. You're gonna have to help me with that last name, defenseman
Oliver Shillington.
Thank you. 2026 first-round pick and a 2028 conditional third-round pick. For that third-round pick, Colorado must win the Cup, and Nelson must play 50% of the playoffs. The Avalanche also get Willem Dufour. I think that's how you say his name. You're going to disagree with me on this. I think it was a little bit of an overpay for Avalanche if they don't extend Nelson in the offseason.
He's not extending in there in the offseason.
Then why'd they get rid of the first round pick? That's honestly, I think you're going to see guys make, help in the playoffs. But for the Avalanche to give up a first round pick for, aging forward, I don't know if he's going to help that much. But, I'm not a huge fan of giving up solid draft capital for old rentals.
How do you know the first round pick was for Nelson? How do you know it wasn't for Dufour? Kidding.
Yeah, no, but what do you think? I just think it's way too much to give up for a rental.
Well, you're going to hear me say this a lot. I love it for both sides. We're going to talk about the Islanders first. It's an excellent return. They get Cal Ritchie, who I think he's a good centerman. He's going to be a great player for them in the future in a couple of years. The first round pick's going to be a lower first, most likely. But, again, Islanders are in kind of Tweenerville. They're kind of at the same spot where I think they need to probably blow it up and start, some of these older. I mean, they re-signed Kyle Palmieri, which a lot of us were like, why are they doing that? He's older, could have got probably a second, maybe a first for him of how the sellers market was.
Yeah, a good
but
point.
They re-signed him, which I don't understand. I mean, it's kind of like the Sabres and Zucker, but I mean, I understand why the Sabres did Zucker. As a Sabres fan, I wanted them to re-sign Jason Zucker because they need the veteran stuff, but the Islanders do not need any more veterans. They've got too many. They need more young guys. But the first round pick will be good, and then the third round pick, if they get it, I mean, it's a good return. Colorado. Winners the deadline. If they don't win the Cup this year, it's a failure of a season.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And yet, I think the Islanders obviously won that trade because Colorado gave up too much for Brock Nelson.
And evidently,
quote rental.
And evidently, I'm telling you, they're not going to re-sign him. Do you know why? Because I'm currently doing a Colorado Avalanche franchise mode, and they do not have enough cap space to re-sign Brock Nelson. Even if I traded out half the roster, they don't have enough to re-sign Brock Nelson. Unless he wants to take a $3 million deal, which I doubt he's going to want to do.
Yeah, so I think the Avalanche acquired some solid players at the deadline, but then again, at what cost?
But you have to understand that, like giving up a first round pick at the deadline. You really gotta understand. It's not a first round pick. It's going to be a late first, which at that point, when you get into the talent pool, unless the draft is that deep, it's a second round talent at highest.
But still, I think that's decent talent for your future.
Not really. I mean, to quote Steve Dangle, like the top 5 to top 10 picks, you know what you're getting. After that, it's all magic beans. You don't know what you're going to get. You could get Tage Thompson at 25, or you could have Kiefer Bellows, who was absolutely terrible. Like, you don't know. Like,
I mean, that's a fair point.
It's not a risk. Trading first, it's not a risk. If you're a good team, and you know you're going to be a good team for a few years, it's not a risk trading first round picks.
That's a fair point. I just think for a team like the Avalanche who can't afford to re-sign some of these players like Brock Nelson, you got to look into your prospect pool, right? So that's where I think those picks come in handy, in my opinion. But I do see what you mean. Moving on to our next trade, Beauvillier traded to Washington for a second-round pick.
This is all you, bro.
Washington essentially just helped out their rival. I sat here last time saying Kyle Dubas can't do anything at the deadline because he's like stuck in mediocrity, and I think he may have heard me.
I think he did.
Man, that just makes me mad, honestly. Like, Dubas finally pulled the plug, and they're acquiring draft capital now. Penguins are obvious sellers, and I honestly think they won the deadline for that. Like, they finally picked a side. That's what they needed to do like 2 years ago. And then you look at Washington, trading a second-round pick. Not a huge fan of what we gave up for, Look, the Capitals coming into the deadline needed another guy on the bottom 6, but I really wasn't hoping to give up anything more than a third-round pick. They got Beauvillier. He's a solid guy, but I don't think he's worth a second-round pick.
Well, considering what some guys went for at second-round pick, we should going right for a bottom 6er. So
no, you're right, but I do think it was an overpay. I just think everyone.
Oh yeah, it's 100% an overpay, but Beauvillier is going to give you a little bit of juice in the bottom 6. So I mean, if you're,
it is, but is it worth a second-round pick? I don't think so. So that's all I have to say.
If you're making far run in the playoffs, you're not even going to think about that second-round pick. It's going to be a third essentially, which at that point is irrelevant for prospects.
Good point, but let's just pray that we do, because I don't know. Capitals are a different team in the playoffs. They're absolutely unreal in the regular season, but hopefully that translates to the playoffs. Only time will tell. We'll see. All right, all your brother Josh Norris to the Sabres in exchange for Dylan Cousins.
That's not all. It was Norris and Jacob Bernard Docker, defenseman, right-handed shot for Dylan Cousins, defenseman Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick. Well, I know why this happened. We got confirmation of that a couple days later when Paul Bissonnette falsely reported that Rasmus Dahlin asked out. But
do you think Paul Bissonnette loves spreading misinformation?
Yes, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. That'll be next week. As a Sabres fan, I don't know how to feel. I'll keep it somewhat short and sweet because I could go on about a half-hour tangent about the Sabres, but we're not going to do that today. We don't have the time. But if Josh Norris can stay healthy, which he's already hurt, great. He's going to be better than Dylan Cousins. Jacob Bedard Docker, former first-round pick with Ottawa. I hope they play him with power. Maybe he'll find us to be able to get an opportunity here and succeed. Hopefully. I love this deal for Ottawa. Dylan Cousins has already looked great for them. They didn't really do too much last night, but he's got 3 points in 4 games. He's going to be... We'll see what he does because he was very underperforming. It seemed like, especially after the comments after the win last night against Vegas, that the vibes were up a lot. And I don't know. Maybe Dylan Cousins was part of the problem here in Buffalo. I don't want to say it, but the core had to be shaken up, and they shook the core up tenfold. Hopefully it's more moves to come because they need it. Because this team looks like certain nights like last night where they are down 2-0 and 3-2 late, and they come back and win it in a shootout. And they have a lot of juice, and the team is just, they're playing. The fans are into it. I can see it. They control play. They allow a couple goals, and then it spirals from there. Like they have the ball to be great, but they need a couple guys to send them with top, preferably a right shot defense and a better bottom 6. And Mitch Marner, please, Kevin, go do it. But it's a great deal for Ottawa. Dennis Gilbert, big physical guy, be a 7th-round defenseman in that second-round pick. Unless Buffalo does something drastic and is a good team next year, is going to be a high second-round pick. So good deal for Ottawa, and that's obviously jump-started their playoff push because they're now like 5 points ahead in the wild card, and they're looking like they're going to have the first wild card in the Atlantic.
Yep, I agree.
Or in the Eastern Conference. So it's a great move for them. So
I'll give my 2 cents on this. I think Ottawa won the trade right now.
I 100% agree.
Right now, though, I
agree.
Bernard Docker is, I don't want to say he's sneaky good, but he could could be something in the near future. Could be.
It's
Not
kind
saying
of
he will be, but
he's kind of like Bo and Byron, because Byron was kind of mired back behind all those great defensemen in Colorado. He was a former top 5 pick, and he came to Buffalo, and he was good. He's still good. He's just not whatever he thought he was going to be, but he's better than what he is in Colorado.
let's see what he can do in Buffalo.
I'm hoping that's the same case for Bernard Docker, because Buffalo needs a partner for power desperately, and they need a right shot defenseman.
If Bernard Docker exceeds expectations and Norris can stay healthy and be the same Norris he was in Ottawa,
Buffalo's trade, hands down.
Yeah, 1 second.
Because I fully expect Dylan Cousins to come back down to reality and start doing Dylan Cousins stuff again. Which is not showing up for 10 games at a time.
100%. If all that happens, Buffalo won the trade. But as of right now, I'll say Ottawa wins. We'll see what happens down the line. This is one we're going to have to look back like 2 years from now and say, oh yeah, Buffalo won that trade.
All right, well, we got to start hurrying up here because we got about 20 minutes in time left. So we got to start rapid fire doing some of these.
How about the Jets acquiring Brandon Tanev again for a 2027 second round pick? I think, once again, I'm going to say it was an overpay. Guy on expiring contract, giving up, I don't know, I think what maybe could be a good draft pick. We'll see in the near future, I guess.
Doubt it.
And the Kraken just keep loading up on draft picks. I think it was a good trade for the Kraken. I think they won the trade.
No.
We'll see what Tanev does for the Jets. I don't know. Unless they re-sign him in the offseason, I think it's just, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a waste unless they win the cup. But I go back to the previous trades we talked about. That's what I think.
Stop me if you've heard this before on this podcast. And Austin, you can probably make a short out of this if you want. I love this trade for the Jets. They know Brandon Tanev. He's an all juice guy. Great bottom sixer. Great PKer. A lot of speed. Good juice. Good vibes. It's exactly what the Jets needed. They know what they're getting in him. It's a perfect trade for them. I'm sure they're 100% okay giving a second-round pick for him. It's a great move for them, in my opinion. They needed some juice in the bottom 6. They got it with Tanev, and watch out for the West. Top 3 teams in the West it's going to be a dogfight between them, Colorado, and Dallas.
We shall see what happens. All right, how about the Maple Leafs? I think this is one of the worst trades, actually. Getting rid of a first-round pick for Scott Laughton.
Yeah, this one was
This one was a head-scratcher.
Not really, but it's a lot to give up.
Okay, head-scratcher as in the return that the Flyers
got.
Yeah.
Toronto 100% needed some center depth, and they needed some grit and physicality for the penalty kill.
Yeah, I get the need for wanting a center.
And they got a guy with term. I think Laughton's got a couple of years left on the contract, at least.
Right, I get the need for wanting a center, but there was no need to get rid of a first-round pick for Laughton.
and prospect Nikita Grabinkin, So,
not much to talk about that.
I think I'll keep it short. It's a good deal for Philly. They get a prospect, they get a first, and then it's a good deal for Toronto because they finally have some of that grit and grind they haven't had in the playoffs for the last couple of years, or last 8 years is what I should say. Crazy's been that long, but
I'm gonna disagree. I don't know what Toronto was doing on that one.
Laughton's gonna be a good piece in the bottom 6.
It's like trading a first-round pick for Lars Eller. Like,
he's better than Lars Ellers. No offense.
I don't know. Same age. They put up the same numbers. I think Laughton adds a little bit more physicality, but I don't know. At what cost?
How about we do this? How about we leave the big 3 trades for the end?
All right, sounds good.
So we're gonna go to Charlie Coyle to Colorado in a 5th to Boston. Coyle in a 5th in 2026 to Colorado for Casey Middlestat, prospect Will Zellers, and a 2025 second-round pick.
Bruins.
Yeah.
Zellers. One less team we have to worry about in the East now.
Yay.
But, I'm glad Sweeney, kind of like Dubas, he picked a side earlier than Dubas. But if you know what I mean, I just, I'm glad the Bruins finally pulled the plug as a Caps fan. I'm sure as a Sabres fan too. So
yes, as a Sabres fan who absolutely hates Boston, yeah, it's awesome to see him down in the basement and help with us. So
also a great move for Avalanche.
I think it's going to be a good. It has the potential to be good for both teams. Charlie Coyle is going to be great for the playoffs for Colorado, and he's under contract for the next couple of years. Casey Middlestat has shown flashes, but not enough over some period of time. But he maybe find another. He could maybe turn to like he was last year with Buffalo and Colorado and be that guy again. But we'll see. He'll be a third line center for Boston, and then the second round pick always. It'll be good for Capital because they're going to need it for the prospects because they don't really have much for prospects in the system. They might now after the couple trades they made, but then we'll tell. Red Wings acquire Craig Smith and Peter Mrazek again for Joe Veleno, sending him to Chicago. I love it. It's a win for Chicago. Joe Veleno is going to help them. As I mentioned earlier, they need guys. They just need capable NHL players.
Yeah, I think it was like
prospects.
Exactly. I think it was like a minor win. Not a huge win, but that's a good one.
And then Detroit, what are we doing here?
Exactly. This is probably one of the most useless trades I've seen in a long time.
I know why they did it, and I actually mentioned it in the podcast, so guess what? I was right. So they needed a goalie.
Good on you, but
Peter Mrazek was not and they had a lot more issues than just goaltender that I felt like they needed to address. And you got Craig Smith, who's not going to solve those issues. Detroit gets an L. They get an F at the deadline. Yzerman did not do enough at the deadline to help this team push. Like Ottawa added. A lot of these teams at the deadline added a lot. And I understand he didn't want to sell the prospects and stuff, but at some point you got to remove your head from your ass and get rid of the prospects and get some capable NHL players in here, and he's not doing it. And if they miss the playoffs this year, man, oh man, Hockey Town is not going to be happy, which is very possible how a couple teams look. So, I don't know.
They've dropped 7 out of their last
8.
Yep, 7 out of the last 8. I thought it was out of the last 10, actually.
Maybe it is, but I know they lost 6 straight, beat Buffalo, and then,
Yeah, they've dropped a lot. So, yeah, definitely losers at the deadline. No doubt about that. Don't understand wanting to get Peter Mrazek. I get the need for a goalie, but Peter Mrazek, I think that was probably one of the more useless trades we saw.
So here we go. Devils going to panic mode after losing Jack Hughes for the year.
And the replacement is Cody Glass.
Yes, the replacement is Cody Glass from Pittsburgh for a third-round pick in 2027. Prospects, Jonathan Gruden, no, not the head coach. Prospect Chase Stillman, unsigned prospects Max Graham.
I've said it before, like twice already in the podcast. Dubas just loading up on draft picks makes me mad. Not much to say about that.
It's a super minor trade for me. Glass is gonna just fill a role in the third line for.
I can't believe they even got a third for Cody Glass and then a few prospects.
Gruden and Stillman are gonna be AHL guys for the Scranton Penguins. So it's a really minor trade. The last kind of minor trade we're going to talk about here before we get to the big three that happened at the end of the deadline is Ottawa reacquires. You might have not known this, but they reacquired. Did they? No. He was in New Jersey. My bad. Regardless, they reacquire Fabian Zetterlund, Tristan Robbins in a 2025 fourth, from San Jose for forward Zach Ostapchuk, Noah Gregor going back to San Jose for like the 10th time it seems, and a 2025 second. Ottawa wins this trade hands down. I don't know what San Jose was doing here. Zetterlund was one of their better players. He was still young, had term. I hate this for them. Zetterlund's going to be a great third-line guy for Ottawa. He's a great young player. And then...
Dude, I would hate to play Ottawa in the first round of the playoffs.
That's going to be a team if you're the winner of the Metro, which is probably going to be Washington. Well, actually, between because it's probably going to be Florida. Between Florida and Washington, who do you think is going to have a higher points?
At the end of the season?
Yes.
Washington.
Okay, so then Florida be playing them. So, because they're gonna get the one in the wild card spot.
I think that's gonna be a better series than people.
It's gonna go to 7 if Linus Ullmark plays like he does, and a couple of the guys in that Senators lineup play like they know they can. Kachuk versus Kachuk is gonna feed families.
Oh yeah,
it's gonna be
great.
It's gonna go 7 games. Florida's gonna win it, but Senator fans, I'm sorry, I hate you all because I can't stay in Ottawa forever, but.
But you know what? Credit to Senators fans because they've stuck in there during the toughest times.
You guys
finally showing something.
You guys have finally got a really good team under you, and props to Travis Green, who I laughed at when they signed. I laughed at like Ottawa's going to suck again. I don't know what he's given these guys post New Year, but Ottawa's been on fire, and they've been excellent. So good on Ottawa. Congrats, Senator fans. I hate you all.
And then Sharks on the other side keep acquiring draft picks.
Sharks, I don't know. It's a second-round pick, but it's so nothing. So what do you want to do? Do you want to do the first big trade? Do you want to just kind of go in tiers of, like, names? Leave the best for last? Or do you want to go biggest?
You pick first. We have 2 huge ones to get to.
So we're going to do Brendan Carlo first.
We have 3. Yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about Carlo.
So Toronto finally, after years and years and years of Leaf fans whining and crying that they don't have a top right-handed defenseman, which they didn't, they finally do, and they go to the big bad Boston Bruins and keep knocking them out, and they get Brendan Carlo for Fraser Minton, a conditional first-round pick in 2026, and a 2025 second-round pick. I love this trade for Toronto. Brendan Carlo, I saw that, and I cried tears because I hate the Leafs, but it's an excellent move for the Leafs. Will it help him out of the first round? Time will tell. But Carlo's going to be an excellent piece to play alongside Riley or Ekman Larson. He's a great defensive guy. He's gonna solidify that top four, and he's gonna be just a super solid, reliable defenseman for Toronto. And for Boston, it's a good return because Fraser Minton's was their like second prospect behind Easton Cowan. The first round pick is always helpful next year, and then the fourth just a throw in. But Toronto, man, they made out like bandits at the deadline. I think Carlo is going to be a super impactful piece for them in the playoffs. I think it's going to be an excellent deal for them, especially since he's under contract for another year.
So a first and a fourth for Carlo. I think Carlo is a good
and a top prospect.
Yeah, I think Carlo's a solid defenseman to have in the playoffs. But for a first and a fourth,
it's a good deal.
It might just be a little too much.
No, it's
in my
not.
opinion.
Think about it though. Right-handed defensemen are such a commodity, and they draw the most amount of trade value.
Fair point.
And especially how good Carlo is, and you're trading him to a division rival. That's exactly what I thought they would give up for.
Is Carlo really going to make that much of a difference?
Yes, because he's got that play of experience of getting out of the first round, and he's a bigger defenseman and he's a lot more grittier than a lot of the defensemen Toronto's had, and they had never had that top tier rate defenseman.
This is just
they
one of those
finally
trades.
Have that.
This is just one of those trades where I'm going to say again, time will tell. Time's really going to tell.
We'll see if the Toronto curse is real.
Because let me tell you, if it is real and it continues, this is a waste of a trade. I'm not going to lie. I just think it's...
I don't think so because he's not a rental. He's under contract for another year.
No, that's true. But what I'm saying is, if the curse continues and they still can't get past like first or second round of the playoffs, I mean, I don't know at that point. I just think it's just too much for...
At that point, the core's got to change, not the players. The core four, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, and Matthews, and it will change this year because Marner is not re-signing with them.
Right.
He's coming to Buffalo. Delusional, but it's okay. The second big deal that came in post deadline, quote unquote post deadline, that made Leaf fans, specifically Steve Dangle, hit the floor and cry. Brad Marchand, the Rat, is joining the Rats. He's going to the Panthers. Oh my God, can't believe it. For a conditional second round pick.
Buzzer beater.
Was a buzzer beater. It will become a first round pick if Florida wins 2 rounds of the playoffs and Marchand plays at least half of that, which is going to turn into a first round pick because Florida's going to go to at least the Eastern Conference Finals. Man,
you're gonna laugh at me.
I am gonna laugh at you gauging what the circumstances are on this trade.
Dude, it was either you lose Marchand for nothing or you get a pick for him. It's as simple as that. Marchand was gonna leave in the offseason. I don't know if he had any interest in coming back to a rebuilding team. He was gonna go play somewhere where he could contend for.
He wanted to stay in Boston. It's just they gave him an offer so absurdly low that he's like, okay, I'm only going to Florida. So Boston screwed the pooch on this tenfold. They could have had Marchand back that next year. They probably will get him back next year. Honestly, they'll probably re-sign in Boston. Let's be honest. But Panthers, oh my God, I can't wait for the playoffs. Can you imagine a line of Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, and Matthew Tkachuk, aka you have to bleep this out. I'm sorry, Austin. The scumbag line. That line, if Tkachuk is healthy for the playoffs, I do not want to have absolutely anything to do with. They're going to punch you in the face, hit you in the nuts. They're going to do everything in the world just to piss you off, and it's going to work.
The scumbag line.
The scumbag line.
The scumbag line goes hard because it's so true.
Because I don't want to play Florida when fully healthy. I don't. That team is scary.
Dude, I think Marchand's time in Boston was up.
I think so.
So with that being said, it was either he goes for nothing or you get a second round pick for him. I think Bruins. I'm not going to call the Bruins winners at the deadline, but like I said earlier,
no, they're definitely not winners.
But I don't think they're losers either because they finally picked a direction. They know they weren't going to compete in the playoffs and at the end of the regular season.
Yep, they're still 2 points off a playoff spot as of recording today.
But all I'm saying is that I think you and I can both agree that they're not making the playoffs. They're making any noise in the playoffs, and for that matter.
Well, yeah, if they do make the playoffs, they're not making any noise. But
so with that being said, just sell. And I think they're right to do that. Just look to the future. They got their draft picks. I think it was a right move. Honestly.
They screwed the pooch on that one. Now we've got about 15 minutes to talk about the cluster blank.
So last time we talked about the possibility of the Hurricanes trading Mikko Rantanen.
But we said Vegas. He did not, thank the Lord, go to Vegas.
So, we talked about the possibility of him getting traded and, how stupid the Hurricanes would be after only having him for 1 month to get rid of him. And they did. They got rid of him. They sent him to the Stars, where he signed a 8-year contract extension for 12 per $96 million. You want to read what the Hurricanes got?
Logan Stanky Stankoven, that's his nickname, don't yell at me. A conditional first-round pick in 2026. a conditional first-round pick, and I believe it's in 2027, not 2026, or 2028, because you can't trade 2028 picks yet. A 2026 third and a 2027 third, which for Carolina, man, losers. Because this trade single-handedly screwed up the deadline. Because the only other move they made was Mark Jankowski. Because, you know why? Because the contract talk between Jim Neal and the Stars and Mikko Rantanen went way too long to where they couldn't make any moves yet because they didn't know what was going on with Rantanen.
Rantanen might be the most hated player in Colorado
and Carolina. It's a great move for Dallas. Their depth is absurd. Especially after acquiring Granlund earlier in the year, before the trade deadline. Their depth is just, oh my. It's going to be a hard out for the Stars. And then Carolina, it's a good return. Stankoven is going to be a really good center for him. He's a great young player. He's a great goal scorer. 2 first-round picks. I could 100% see them trading them. It's pretty much just trade fodder for another guy to bring in, essentially. Saying the thirds will be used the same way. But, man, giving up Marty Necas and Jack Drury, who at one point had more points than he did for Colorado, it's got to be such a kick in the balls as a Hurricanes fan. It's got to be such a kick in the balls.
So here's my question to you. Can you answer this one for me?
Sure.
Why would the Hurricanes acquire Rantanen back in January without knowing he'd signed an extension? Why would they
I
do
don't
that?
think it's that. I think they acquired him to make a push. And they offered him a contract he didn't know.
But with that being said,
Hang on. I didn't finish my thought yet.
why would you trade all that for a guy that you don't know?
I think that
gonna do
he
well.
left
Or sign an
Carolina,
extension.
and we could all see it if you watch Carolina Hurricane games. He does not fit Rob Brendamore's system. He was not going to succeed in that system. We all saw it. He was not Mikko Rantanen. He looked average, which is not Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen is a top 10 to top 5 player in this league when he is going, when the moose is loose, as they said in Colorado.
I'll tell you
So
this.
I think once he realized that the system wasn't going to work for him and that Brendan Moore wasn't going to go anywhere, it's time to get up and get out of town. And that was that.
So, total, I don't know, what's a good word to call it?
Flubbing.
Failure in Carolina in terms of their front office.
Oh, 100%, because you should have had, if you realized it wasn't working by probably that Monday of the deadline, I would have been on the phones calling teams about Rantanen.
Here's essentially what the Hurricanes got rid of and what they got back. They traded away Mikko Rantanen, Martin Necas, Jack Drury, a second and a fourth.
Mm-hmm.
4, Stankoven, Taylor Hall, 2 firsts and 2 thirds.
Yeah, we should mention Taylor Hall.
Wow.
He's been playing on the fourth line for them, and he's not been productive. He had his first goal against Buffalo like a couple days before the deadline.
That's horrible.
He-
That is actually horrible.
Maybe it was his first point as a Hurricane. It might have been that too. I'm not sure. I know it was his first goal for sure, but it might have also been his first point. He's not been, and they're playing him in a role that he does not succeed in. We all I don't know what they're. I mean, again, Brendan Moore's system has been said numerous times requires a lot of the players. It is a defensive first system, and it's a very demanding defensive scheme. And Mikko Rantanen is not a guy that fits well in those systems.
To call this a total failure from the Hurricanes front office is an understatement. The past 6 weeks have been absurd. Absurd.
Canes fans went from, oh my God, we're in the cup, to, oh my God, we need to fire Eric Tulsky within a month, and that's absurd.
It might be the most pathetic, just sad situation in professional sports.
And the worst part
the second most sad, because the Mavericks exist. But that's a story.
The sad part is they essentially traded Mikko Rantanen and they traded Marty Necas and Jack Drury for Logan Stankoven and Mark Jankowski is essentially what the replacement, and Taylor Hall. That's the replacement.
Yeah, horrible. I mean, there's not much we can say about that. That's
I could see Stankoven being on the level of Necas. I could. He has
maybe,
that,
but until then, we'll see.
and I guess that Hall and Jankowski offset Drury, but man,
Yeah, I mean, total failure.
it's not a great way to use it's bad asset management.
Horrible. Yeah, it's awful.
So that's why they're losers. Grant, they'll make the playoffs and they'll probably go into the second round and get knocked out again. But, yeah, I'm sick as a Carolina Hurricanes fan. I would be if I was. I'd be sick. It's man.
we'll see what they do in the playoffs. I still think they can make some noise in the playoffs, but
They
not
100%
as
should
much
be able
noise
to.
as I thought they were 2 months ago. So
They
It'll be
100% should be able to make some noise in the playoffs. Yeah. Oh, man.
this is a bad look now in the future. So
It is. Let's see. We got about 5 minutes here. If there are any other thoughts that you had about the deadline in general, Sean?
who in your mind was the steal of the deadline? I can give you mine because I certainly didn't see it. I thought it was a nice addition at the time, but I didn't know he was going to be as good as he is right now. Spencer Knight for the Blackhawks is actually like
That's
tearing it
a
up
good
right
one.
now. I think that was probably the biggest steal of the deadline, in my opinion, as of right now. I think the Blackhawks found their goalie for the future. You know, that position was always a question mark during the rebuild, but I think they finally found their guy, hopefully. I always thought highly of Spencer Knight. You know, he was always the backup, obviously, behind Bobrovsky.
Former first-round pick.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, now I think Chicago finally found their guy, and I think Spencer Knight finally has an opportunity to show that he is that guy. He is the number one goalie, and, you know, hopefully whatever Davidson decides to do in the offseason, or whatever Chicago decides to do with Davidson in the offseason, you know, I think as they continue to build and hopefully get better, I think Spencer Knight kind of just adds to that firepower, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. By the way, guys, we are going to get to random player of the day, and Sean was going to guess today because it is a former Capital.
Oh, okay.
So while I'm going off of what I think was the steal of the deadline, you can go out and find a random player for me to guess.
Sounds good.
I
was gonna say, because if you're gonna guess any other player for me, I don't know if I'd be able to get it.
It's a Capital. It's
Okay.
it's an obscure Capital, but you might know who it is.
Okay, if it's a Capital, how long are we talking? Like, how long ago?
Cup years.
Cup. Okay. I think I know who you're gonna say, and I think I'm gonna guess it.
We'll see. My steal of the deadline, it's man. I mean, it's not gonna be like. I think it's gonna be Fabian Zyerler for Ottawa. Like, he's young and he's a stud and he's so good. He's gonna be great for that bottom six, as I mentioned. Like, he's a good power play guy. I don't know what San Jose was doing giving him up, especially like a stop Chuck is the best you could have got for him. Is kind of underwhelming return. Zetterlund is gonna be a great piece. Just some more young depth for that Senators team that's gonna make a run.
Yeah, I mean, Ottawa scares me. For sure. You know?
I would definitely not want to play Ottawa. And another team I wouldn't want to see in the playoffs. Another trade we didn't mention is that they acquired the Blue Jackets acquired Luke Cunnin from San Jose for a fourth.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, I forgot about that.
I wouldn't want to play Columbus if they make it. Especially with everything they've gone on this year.
I agree with that.
If they make the playoffs, dude, watch out. They might be able to pull an upset off like they did in 20. What year was that? 18.
I forget what year it was.
18 or 19.
I can tell you this right now: Columbus and Ottawa would not want to play them in the playoffs. You know, Columbus started off horrible at the beginning of the season, but all they've done is just turn it on.
Johnny's been with them, man. We miss you, Johnny Odro, every day, man.
Yeah,
you and
rest in
Matthew,
peace,
we miss
Johnny.
you every day. Anyway, so we're gonna get to our random player of the day. I'm gonna go get Sean first here. So this player, he's not actively in the NHL, but he still plays hockey. I'm pretty sure. He was drafted by Tampa Bay in 2010, 6th overall. He then he was on Tampa's team, played for Tampa for 3 years. Then he went to Boston, played for Boston for a couple of years, and then he went to Washington in 2016-17.
I feel like I should know this.
And then he went to Florida in 2019, and then he got traded to Chicago in 2021, and he finished the NHL with Chicago in 2022. He has 101 goals and 195 points. He was on the Stanley Cup winning Capitals. Do you know who this player is?
Traded from Boston to Washington in 16, you said?
Yeah, 16-17.
And played in the Cup.
He either traded or was signed in the offseason.
I should know this, and I'm not going to know who it is. Don't tell me. And I'm actually disappointed in myself. Like, my gosh.
I wouldn't say he was a key contributor on that Washington team, but he was on the Washington team when they won the Cup.
Forward or defenseman?
Forward
from Boston. You're going to tell me and I'm going to be so mad. Who is it?
It's Brett Connolly.
Oh, no way. I totally forgot about him.
It's Brett Connolly.
I didn't even know he played for Boston before Washington.
Spent 4 years in Tampa, 3 years in Washington, 2 years in Florida, 2 years in Boston, and his last 2 in Chicago.
Now that you say it, I do remember him going to Florida from Washington. But, yeah, I never would have guessed that he played for Boston before he came to us.
Brett
I didn't
Connolly.
even know he was the 6th overall pick in 2010.
I didn't either. I just learned that looking at Hockey Reference. Shout out hockeyreference.com. Great website.
All right, I got a player for you now.
Okay.
I'm disappointed in myself I couldn't get that. Man, my hockey knowledge is questionable. So we got, I guess, a 6th round pick from San Jose in 2009. But he started out his professional career with the Ducks, went to Vancouver, and then from Vancouver to Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh to Nashville, from Nashville to Minnesota, from Minnesota to San Jose, back to Pittsburgh, and with the Rangers. He does not play in the league anymore.
When was his last year?
24 was last season. He played 45 games, put up 1 goal and 4 assists. He's a forward.
Drafted by San Jose, then went to...
Drafted by San Jose in 2007, and then he came in the league in 2009.
I know who this is, I think. Maybe.
I think
Was he on Anaheim at one point?
Yeah. He started professionally with Anaheim.
He was on Pittsburgh twice?
You know who it is.
I do know who it is.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm 2 for 2. That is Nick Bonino.
Yeah, yes it is.
Bonino.
Yes it is. You are correct. Once again, 2 for 2. I wonder how long the streak is going to continue.
It is Nick Bonino. Because I was sitting there and I'm like, drafted by San Jose, and then I heard Anaheim, and I heard Pittsburgh, and I'm like, it has to be Bonino.
Everyone in the comments below, just start throwing out just obscure hockey names.
Yes, throw obscure. I want to
It's
see.
not
I
gonna
want to see guys like Seth Griffith in the comments. I want guys like that. I want just the most obscure names. Like I want Darren Poopa in the comments. Like real guy, real player. Played for the Sabres. I'm pretty sure at one point was a goalie, but. Anywho, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Snipe Score podcast. Here's our trade deadline thoughts. This is the edition. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic. With the Studs and Duds are back. Studs and Duds will be back next week. But I'm Megan Calkins. For Sean Wallace, the Showtimer's out. Thank you guys and have a great day.